Yeah, I've been dialing up all my IoT stuff. It's so fun. It's fun.
Needs to be fun.
It does. Okay, so I lost my other screen that shows the participants. But anyway, so I'm Joe Glines. I'm here in Dallas, Texas, and
Hey, did you start the recording? You did. That's good.
I did. Yep. Yeah. Thank you, though. Yeah. Obviously, that's a. Oh, and I see my reminder here.
Yeah. Good.
I got something full screen here, and I can't get rid of it. All right, there we go. Yeah. So I'm in Dallas, Texas, and which is not nearly as cold as where Jackie is from. Jackie, why don't you?
Yeah, I'm from Denmark. I'm just outside Copenhagen. So yeah, we have way different weather from where you are, Joe, but still it's manageable. So yeah.
Yeah, and Jackie and I we've been working together for a little bit over 2 years now, I think, of just talking about automating things with AutoHotkey and share the same passions, run into the same issues. You know, now that I think about it, that's one of the other things I'd love to have a webinar on, about how to best tackle trying to get others at work to either let you use AutoHotkey or to say, you know, like you've done, Jackie. We'll demonstrate how to use it, and we'll teach people. And I call it the great things by. They'll go, wow, that's amazing. Oh, I'm so going to learn that, and then they never touch it, right?
Yeah.
But that would be, I think, a fun topic to just discuss. How do we better, quote unquote, sell AutoHotkey?
Yeah, sure.
So anyway, so we have we put together these webinars, and you start off, you know, everyone we had. Let me see this next screen here. Oh, now that's interesting. I'll move this over here so we can see everything. So right now we have 45 registrants. Obviously, no one webinar ever gets the amount of registered, but that's why everybody starts off muted. It's not that Jackie and I are full of ourselves. It's just that it would be mayhem if everyone was talking over each other. And so for the first roughly hour where we go through a presentation that we put together, we will do the talking. If you have questions, raise your hand. You can do that in the tool, or you can ask it in chat. And usually one of us are monitoring chat pretty closely, and we'll, you know, ask the question for you. And then after the first hour, we basically turn off, well, how do I phrase this right? We make it where you can unmute yourself if you want to ask a question. And then generally we've had good luck of people not talking over each other. But that's basically how we start out.
Yeah, it seems to work just fine.
So let's go ahead and get going here. So the first thing, we changed our format a little, where we start off having a script highlight. And I tried this tool a couple years ago now called Lintalist, and it was pretty robust. And granted, I think it's more still for noobs, but it's pretty powerful and easy to use. And so I wanted to just do a couple demonstrations of using it here. So I have it running, and you can't see it, but let me do a screen capture real quick. So this is my system tray, and that little L there is the icon for it. It shows it's running right now. And I am going to bring over an email, a blank email, just to demonstrate. Let me get rid of that. Demonstrate putting in it. Basically, think of it as hotkey on crack, right? So I have the built-in hotkey for it is the caps lock. And basically what you've done is you can put in your text and items, and actually you can do message boxes. You can have it interact with it. I'm going to do a couple examples here where if I start typing, let me just type insert, you can see it's filtering down on the things that have the word insert in it. And if I do this one, it will, depending on what it is, that was not the one I was thinking it was. Let me do HTML, because I saw that one. Yeah, so here's an HTML example. So my name is Joe. And so it inserted, HTML in rich text formatting, right, into my email. So if you had, typically I use a lot of hot strings, and within AutoHotkey, of course, it's just plain text. But let's say you wanted to have it with bullets and whatnot. Lintalist would allow you to even have images and everything, right? So you could easily have some hot strings and even hotkeys. So I'll pull this back up, and let me go back to here. Here you can see you can have a hotkey, or you can type something short. And what's interesting is I haven't quite thought through how I would use this, but if I hit enter, it will insert this one. If I hit shift enter, it will insert this text. And so even for the same hot string or hotkey, I guess hot string, I should say, you can send different things depending on if you hit enter or shift enter. And here's a couple links for you, which we will share this deck after the webinar. We'll make it available online on our websites, then send out links to it. But it's pretty robust, and especially I think for noobs or people who don't program an AutoHotkey, it's a great tool to be able to set up to give to other people that allow them to have an easy interface where once you build it for them, right, they can easily have hot strings and do lots of different ways in how they search and everything. It's pretty robust. It's a little too robust, honestly, for me. I wish there was something, maybe there's an easy way to turn off some things, but it's pretty slick. Jackie, we haven't had a chance to chat. Have you used it?
No, I've only seen it and was intrigued by the idea he had. Of course, there's been more of these types of easy to interact with, but I seem to haven't gotten a notice or whatever you would call that, that it seemed to be working quite well. And he has at least extended it for quite some time. So yeah.
In the what I remember playing with it before, because at one point I had a need for the markdown stuff too, which was interesting. If you're using a tool that has that need, it can send stuff that way. But yeah, it had a lot of flexibility, and it was just a cool script that I thought I'd throw out there.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's nice to have these tools because, yeah, more often than not, it's something like that you can actually share with people that they would use.
That's right. Yeah.
A lot of the time, people are not really interested in learning to.
Right. As easy as it is, yeah, it's still it's what's the right word for that? It for the non-techie person, they're a little afraid of doing 2 colons and then the letters, right? It's kind of funny, but something like this can bridge it for people.
Yeah, exactly. So we just got a question about what it was written in, and of course it's written in AutoHotkey. So yeah, that's the idea of the script highlight. That would most likely always be something written in AutoHotkey.
Yeah, absolutely. There were a couple tools that I use that aren't AutoHotkey that I had thought about at some point bringing up, but to Jackie's point, right? I mean, the focus of these things are using automating and simplification and basically AutoHotkey. So yeah, I would everything that I would ever do would be AutoHotkey. We might mention some of the other tools some other time, but wouldn't be a highlight.
No, you're absolutely right.
And then go ahead.
No, yeah, I was just talking more to this Lintalist. It's always nice to kind of bring up something that people have done some time ago, and you might not be active on the forum and stuff.
Yeah,
so it's great to have some ideas.
Right, because so many things, were created years ago, and then they kind of get forgotten. And especially if you started like this last year, it's just there's so much to learn and that's out there, and that's why I like kind of throwing up little gems that I've seen over the years and going, this is a great tool for sharing. I don't think of it too much for myself, but it's to allow me to share stuff with other people.
Yeah, absolutely, and I've at least seen people who has been in the AutoHotkey community for, let's say, a few months or something like that, and they have automated whatever they started with when they came, and they kind of got hooked on writing AutoHotkey stuff. And sometimes people simply run out of stuff to automate for themselves, and they kind of grasp at straws to kind of get an idea of what they could do. And I see something like this as a great way to give people an insight to what other people has managed to actually do.
Right. All right, let's move on to the topic of the day. And so we have some bullets here, just of the general advice. So this is first off, just in troubleshooting in general, right? The first couple are more just general advice of like, man, as I'm sure you've heard before, annotate, add comments, because I especially, and maybe I have a pathetic memory, but I'll write some stuff and then a year or two later I'll come back to it and I have no idea what I was doing, right? I don't recall what the plan was, and adding in some comments when you're actually writing your functions and what the things do can greatly ease when you come back to it later, or if someone else borrows yours, or of course you borrow someone else's. It's very, very helpful.
Yeah, that's for sure. Especially when you're sharing it on the forum or something like that, because the person you're actually sharing it with or doing it for or whatever might have a good idea of where you're going with stuff, but people coming in reading it later, or if someone actually copies out and uses your snippet, if there's no comments in it when they copy it, they will probably not add them in themselves.
Sure.
So it kind of seeps.
Or worse, Jackie, they will misinterpret what it does, and they will add comments, but it actually, because they didn't write it, they don't understand it. They might even incorrectly document it.
Yeah. That's also a possibility, of course.
The next one is just also good coding of do your best to compartmentalize. I used to start off writing enormous, and I shouldn't say enormously long because they still weren't thousands of lines, but I didn't create functions, I didn't create subroutines, and it made trying to figure out where you are in your script and what's going on, and typically for this topic, what's going wrong, much more difficult.
Yeah, absolutely. I remember being there myself.
Yeah. And the next one, depending on your skill level, right? I look at this, I wish I could do like a logarithmic scale, because when you're new to this, hey, do yourself a favor and change one thing, and like reload the script and test it, right? Don't make too many changes, because when you start making a bunch of changes, it can be really confusing as far as to what actually broke your code.
Yeah, absolutely. And especially if you haven't I can't say that right now, but compartmentalize. Yeah, okay, that's actually hard to say right now. But okay, if you haven't really chopped up your code in nice readable sections and stuff like that, you will really quickly end up changing something that you can't refine, because you're going down some kind of rabbit hole to actually find the bug. And if you just keep changing on the way there, you will have no idea of what you actually did that was the fix.
Yeah. But that's where also the more advanced you get, unless you have a typo, the more changes you can make and you understand what's going on. I definitely don't do nearly as much testing every line for line as I used to, but I still do it more often than other people I know, and it just it's not that hard to pause and make sure what you did didn't kill something.
Yeah, that's for sure.
And I'm reading some some chat stuff of people talking about how important it is to comment stuff, and I love finding stuff where people have documented, especially things like, let's say, a regular expression or an object in, the things that I'm not that familiar with, and I can get confused very easily, and parsing it out can really help in adding comments. Next, go ahead.
Yeah, I'm also reading what they're saying in the chat, and yeah, for sure, people are talking about not doing so many inline comments, maybe. And yeah, I must say that over time, I've also done less and less inline comments, but that depends on how um, I myself feel about the current code. If it's something I've written quite a lot of times, and if it's for myself, I might not think about it at all, and I might rewrite some comments if I'm sharing it publicly or something like that. But yeah, most of the time it might be a section header or something like that.
That's a great point. It doesn't have to be line by line explaining exactly what that line does. It can just be helping understand what the whole function does or the subroutine does or whatever. Yeah.
Yeah, I'd say that naming convention in your script, generally naming your functions something that makes sense, or your variables and stuff like that.
Right.
That also goes a long way.
It does. This next line, and that's where if you're using like Site or Studio and some other stuff, let's say I'm working on something and I'm not sure what I'm going to do. What I typically do is I'll hit Control D, which duplicates it, and then for me, Control Q, I comment it out. And this way I can play with this one, and I have a backup, right? So I have, especially like in a regular expression, where I get close, and then I'm like, oh, I just need this one more part to figure out, and I don't do this, and I screw up the thing so much that now I don't even have what I did have. And so it takes, what did that take, a half a second to basically make a backup, and then later I clean it all up and get rid of the other ones, and hopefully annotate it, but not always.
No. We do it as much as we can.
Okay, so now this next part here we get into when you're actually troubleshooting. It's similar to proofreading, right? If you're stuck on something, sometimes it really helps to take a break. What I often do, actually, I'll go take a nap, and I take like 3-minute naps, right, to help understand that. But or switch to something else. Switch, especially something outside of AutoHotkey or coding. Your mind will take a break, and when you come back, it's easier to look at it and see, like, oh man, what was I thinking, right? That's the problem.
Yeah. I of course, if I've worked on it a lot, and I kind of just get stumped or whatever and can't find it, I would also just walk away, do something else, whatever it might be, and maybe even sleep on it if it's late enough.
Mm-hmm.
More often than that, I actually do what you have next.
Well, which is a great one. I had read, but I had read the bobblehead doll, but then I was researching it and I found it of teddy bear or rubber duck. But basically, you have an inanimate object, and you explain the issue that you're running into to the inanimate object, and it has to be, the other thing is it has to be out loud, right? If you do it out loud, your brain actually works a little differently, and you often literally, I don't know if it's, well, I shouldn't say literally, but you hear yourself and you go, well, oh, right, of course it can't do that. It just makes you rethink it. This next one, and that's where, so Jackie is far more advanced at programming than I am, right? And so what works really well, though, is like sometimes I'll get stuck and I'll ask Jackie, and often I'll be explaining to him, and I realize what's going on, right? Or because he's a better programmer, he can spot the problem. But even vice versa, right? Even though I'm not as good of a programmer as him, he can explain it to me, and it goes back to that saying it out loud can help, or because like when you're proofreading your own work, right, you will think there's a word there and it's not there, right? So no matter how good of a programmer you are, someone else can just ask you a question and you're like, well, what is that? Oh, crap, right? And you realize it's a typo, right, or something like that.
Yeah, exactly. I see others in the comments as well also have used coworkers for it, and that was also how I started doing the bobblehead doll kind of thing. With, even though they had absolutely no programming experience, I would still bring them over to the screen and kind of line for line explain to them what I wanted to happen there and jump around in the code, following the flow, and eventually I'd most likely end up actually finding the flaw that
Right.
way. So,
This is where people with split personalities have a great advantage, right? Because they can talk to their other self.
coming back and seeing code they didn't even know they could write. Yeah.
Or they'll use their dog as someone put in there.
Yeah, that was a nice one too.
Yeah. All right. So moving on. And then, of course, search the AutoHotkey forum, search that Stack Overflow, because often other people have solved the very thing you're doing. I wish there was a great way, which I'm sure all of you guys, you're geeky enough, right, to learn. Often, if you don't even know what the problem is, it's hard to ask the question to find the problem, right? So that's a tricky one of making sure you understand, you put in the right keywords to help try to, find the solution. But both of those are great places to look. And then, Go ahead, Jackie.
Yeah, I don't know. I was kind of drawing something. I can remember. I think it came up just today where someone was asking about what was it, PWB or something. That was a naming convention that was used in the beginning for COM objects, as it is pointed to web browser or something like that. And it has lived for so long now, and people are starting to totally miss out on where it came from because they would just see it in code and try and use that for something special, and it's way off.
Yeah, it takes on its own life. I got you. Yeah. I'm not going to try Ferry Van Gelder, and I hope I'm close. This is a great one. I should add this, which I am a terrible typist, right? So I will literally try to copy and paste as much as I can because I have learned too painfully that it's easy to. I have dyslexia and to invert things and whatever. I mean, especially thankfully AutoHotkey is not case sensitive, because when I was doing Python, that drove me nuts, is I would uppercase and lowercase and not realize it. But yeah, copy and paste, that's a good tip to do that when you can.
Absolutely.
Okay, so the next one, just to help people, especially noobs, right? When you've searched and you can't find the solution you're looking for, posting questions to the forum, right? Here's just some general tips to help both you and the people on the forum, because and Jackie is one of the admins on the forum, and he answers a lot of questions, and you see poorly written things, right, where people, the IRC, that's a good one too, yeah. But they will post questions but not explain it all. So I outlined a couple bullets here of one is do your best to isolate the issue, give your example code. If there's data or variables or functions that you're using, make sure you include those. Explain the circumstances, in as much painful detail as you can to explain what's going on.
I would actually like to add give example code. I did at one point extract, I think it was almost 30,000 topics about image search.
Yeah.
And I made some extractions of data from that. And it actually showed a clear thing, and that was if you had code in your question, you would get answers quickly and more precisely.
Great point. Yep.
So yeah, giving the code lets the person on the other end much easily figure out what you're actually struggling with, because the code is just a little bit more universal than how you explain it. So yeah.
Yeah. And then, it's very easy nowadays to take, and I have links here to free programs that do each of these for screenshots or an animated GIF of what's happening, or even a video. Those can help drastically, because when someone can literally see what happens, it just changes everything. And then put in relevant information about, what version of AHK you're using, if you're using 32 versus 64-bit of Windows, the different versions of Windows, if you're using any sort of other software or hardware, right? Listing the relevant information will help.
Yeah, because the relevant information can be a lot of different things. It simply depends on what you're trying to do.
Right.
Like saying, I can't get my hotkey to work because it doesn't register when I click it, and then you can start questioning. And okay, so where are you trying to do it? And more often than not, they're trying to do it in, let's say, a game or Java application or something like that, which just has some other rules. And if you had provided that information right off the top, the person asking might not have, I'm not sure if this is happening, but I saw it happening at one point, is that if someone steps into a topic and asks some questions, that topic most likely will also be answered by the same person. and if you end up having this person ask you some questions and you give some answers that the person cannot answer for you because it's way off or something they don't know anything about or something that doesn't interest them, you might have crippled your own chances of actually getting a useful answer.
Yeah, and it's not, or it's in addition to, I guess. You're making it more painful for both yourself and for the person that's trying to help you.
Yeah.
The other thing that I would do, by the way, the other thing I would highly encourage is, if you've never posted to the forum, which I don't know if I'm kind of assuming every one of you have maybe, but I used AutoHotkey for probably 2, maybe 3 years before I ever once posted to the forum. I was just petrified of people realizing how bad I was, right? And then I realized, you know what? I mean, I'm not that bad. But what I would do is really isolate the issue that I'm seeing. And if I had, let's say I had a 1,000 long line script, and I have isolated it where it's really these 5 lines, but those 5 lines used variables from other parts of the script. Instead of taking the entire script and posting it, what I would do is, create hard code the variable and the values that would get passed to that data. And that way, the person that's helping me is isolated down to knowing exactly what comes in and what it's trying to do. And sometimes it was just like I'd have a web page that would couldn't be accessed by people in the forum as well, or outside of my work.
Yeah, exactly, because that is truly one of the things with having people post code is one thing. Having people post a ton of code, so you actually need to use, let's say, a lot of time on figuring out. I remember taking on some questions where people had just posted, let's say, 200 lines of auto-recorded script.
Yeah.
And figuring out what their issue was. They might have said that on line 57 because their editor might have line numbers, but you couldn't really see it on the forum. So you had to copy out the code and look it over and kind of narrow it down, because if they just had the same action 20 times, why not loop
Right.
and stuff? If you're already modifying the code.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'm saying it can go both ways, because some people like to narrow it down so much that you lose the context.
Agreed. Yeah. But that's what you have to really know what you're doing in order to. If you're not sure what you're doing, put it all, right? You're better off putting it all there, including make sure you include the other functions it uses, or at least a link to where someone can get the function. But if you have a good idea what you're doing, trimming it down is, I think, nicer often. But some people do want to see the full thing, and that's where I'll use like a paste bin. I'll post a link to the whole thing there, and I'll try to isolate the small bit on the forum.
Yeah.
All right, let's get into the next slide here. It has some examples, and again, we'll send out this deck after this, and it'll be available. But I'm sure we've all used message boxes, maybe even tooltips and pause, right? These are built-in commands that that can help with debugging. Checking the error level after something's done. A lot of commands have an error level, and if there's a 1 there, then you can help understand it. Try, catch, and throw, right, can be very helpful in understanding. Well, especially you can stop if you do have something like on a website where the element isn't always there, right? It's kind of like an if-then way to deal with it, and it won't break your script. And correct me if I'm wrong here, Jackie, but the throw, like you can help diagnose. Is that right?
Yeah. That if it actually throws something, you can use that. Yeah, but I'd say that try, catch, and throw. I'm not sure I would really say that those are go-to debuggers. You can, of course, enclose stuff in those, and
Yeah.
you can handle errors or missing elements or something like that. But to really debug
Fair
it,
enough.
to
Yep.
remove it, that might be the actual tool you
Sure.
use to handle whatever was going on. Yeah.
Fair enough. And then then there's, and we're going to demonstrate a bunch of these in the next on the next slide. We'll do some live coding. So list varies will show you all the variables and their values they have in them at the moment. List lines and list hotkeys and key history. These are all things that'll show you what's recently happened in your script. If you're playing with an object, this is one, especially if you're new to playing with objects. I used to spend a crap load of time where I would do something with an object. I thought I did. Let me restate that. And I would be trying to look at the values of it. And after like an hour, I would use this as object and realize the thing I'm looking at is not an object, right? I did something wrong. So that's my go-to now of like, is the stupid thing an object? Yes. Okay. Then I'll start working on it. And then when you're in a debugger, this output debug can be helpful. And then here are a couple, these two functions, which I'll demonstrate at least one of them, can be helpful for peeking inside of objects because you can't just do a message box with an object straight away if showing the value unless you start writing some special stuff around it. There are, I'm not going to go into these, but this link will show you the different debugging clients that you can hook into AutoHotkey and use. And then we'll do a couple demos with AHK Studio and Site in the built-in debugging stuff, which can be incredibly helpful and useful.
It sure can, yeah. I'd say that most of the time people that are fairly new can get by with a lot of the tools at the top because I think they'll handle most of it. But I'm pretty sure that if you get used to the debugging tools, those would immediately put you on the right path anyway.
Yeah.
So,
and having said that, maybe it's 8 out of 10 times, I still start off with a message box, right? Because the thing I'm working on, it's simple and I know where I am, and it's just a very quick, easy way to look at it. These are just all some other tools that you can use to get to it.
Yeah.
Here is also, before we actually get into the literal debugging, just because it often we're in Windows, right? I'd say when you start, first restart your script, and the second one, if you think it's a problem, restart the computer, because we're in Windows and we all know Windows can be quirky, right? And there's nothing more painful than spending hours on end and finding out something just was acting weird.
Absolutely, because again, restarting the script, that's one thing. It depends on the error you get, of course, but if it's just a script acting up or a hotkey that's not reacting or whatever, and you had it working, those are truly the right place to start. And then if you are testing newly written code that hasn't worked before, then I'd say 2.
Right, gotcha. Then start off with like a message box or list varies. You can also, which we'll demonstrate if you're new to AutoHotkey, of double-clicking the icon gives you some access to some cool stuff that's really easy to get to. Here are some things just to make sure of, like, are you really sure, paying attention to where the error is, because sometimes it's not where you think it is. and I should allude, that was leading up to here too, is don't just look at the exact line that the error you get. Look a little bit before it and after it as well, because sometimes, let's say you forgot to close a quote on something or just whatever, things can right around the error message you get be affecting, be the cause.
Mm-hmm.
Another one that just will come up is, you didn't realize you had already used that variable and you're using the same one again, and that can make you think there's something else going on and you can waste a lot of time. Understanding the difference between global and local scope and can often be just like you realized, again, you had the same variable, but one was local and it had a global and whatnot. Yeah. And then make sure that you're not trying to do math on a string, and the integer and the level of decimals and things like that, or it's an object you thought it was an object and it's not, or it is an object and you didn't realize it was. The function you did returned an object.
Yeah. Your sound is kind of going a little in, out, and up and down. I don't know what it is, Joe, but just to let you know. Yeah. But yeah, true that, even though the AutoHotkey helps you a lot with what you can do with what's in a variable, as you don't normally need to take care of it's a string or if it's an integer and stuff. Sometimes if you start doing more involved stuff, you will need to have at least an idea of what you're working with. COM is one way of looking at it, and object is also, because most of them will actually store stuff in AutoHotkey in a very specific way, because it's actually set on the back end how AutoHotkey handles it. So it's the same when you are passing it to other interfaces. That might be an online API or something like that.
Yep.
You might need to pass it as a specific format. So yeah, right. Good idea to have a simple inkling of what you're actually.
Yeah. All right. Now let me do a little screen capture here so I can play with this. So now let's start off in sight. So here is a debug, just a script that really doesn't do anything, but I'm going to demonstrate. So those of you who use Sight, let me save this. Now this little bug button, right, or I can hit F7. When I hit it, oh, you know what? Let me exit out of it because I think it. Yeah, if apparently I have that running in Studio. So let me just close Studio. That should take care of that. Yeah, right. Now I'm going to hit debug here. And this allows you to step into it. And you know what? Let me also, I'm going to display my variable list. So here are the variables. And notice like the global variables for dog and object and test1, test2, var, they don't have any, they are registered. And Jackie, you can help me understand that. AutoHotkey will process the whole script, but doesn't store it. Help me with that.
No, it does store it. It's those there are of course stored at runtime, so to speak, but you can change it.
But it didn't set like the dog doesn't have a content right now. So see how dog right here is blank? Oh, and it's still, I mean, when it runs through it, and I guess that's the thing is, but what surprised me is when I start the debugger, see these things, I haven't even gotten to them yet, and yet the debug knows that they're going to exist.
Yeah, it's read all of the script and it's of course made the variables, so to speak. But yeah, you haven't assigned anything to them yet because you haven't run that line of code. So of course they can't have any kind of content. Mm-hmm. That makes sense. So as soon as you actually step into the debugging, they will start to get.
Yep. And so here's Boxer. Now here's let me do the next one. There's Boxer and Hello. What also is cool is, let's say you were working on something, this var one, right? And you notice down here, I have an outbook debug, and it's going to show var. But what's cool is in a debug, this allows me under var is I can double click and I can say, I can actually change the value of what's stored in that variable. And so if I'm doing debugger, when I come down here, and this is going to dump it into my output window in sight, it's going to show you the world is what's in there.
Yeah.
And
it's a
here,
nice tool.
It is. So here in the object, you can double click and show the contents. So as we step through, now we're going to jump into the function. Oh, and that was the other one I did was, let's see right here. Now here we have a local var and a global var, right? I'm sorry, well, a variable named var that's both, there's one inside my function with the value and outside that's global.
Yeah.
And so this is just great ways to see what's going on. We can also, I should have had it visible there because it would have shown you I was in a different place. The call stack will help understand where you are in your script and subroutine type things. And then this output debug, I love this in the sense because if you're not in debug mode, this will not do anything. It won't show. Yet if I'm in debug and I run it, and I this next one, see how it sent world here? That's because I changed the value to be world, right? Yep. But this will only show up if I'm in debug mode. It won't show up if I'm not in debug mode. So instead of adding and subtracting message boxes, I can just have this code in here and change it, but unless I'm running in debug mode, it doesn't need to be there.
Exactly.
The next one, I just paused my script. Let me unpause it and keep going forward. Now here we're going to get into the list show vars. So where to go?
I have a message box somewhere that you need to close.
Ah, you're right. You are right. Oh, that's why, because this, let me close that. I forgot that's there.
So now you have the list vars somewhere.
Yeah, it must be on a...
It seems to be that one.
There we go. Yeah, so this, and it's going to show, again, for the objects, it doesn't show you the content, right? So
no.
What's nice is actually you can see, now, correct me if I'm wrong, that's the memory address, Jackie? Is that what that is?
Yeah, that would also be my my take on that. That would be the memory address, yeah.
But it's a great, easy way. And let me also, let me close, I think I can close that now. Oh, I gotta now show, well, I'll get back to that in a second here. And we can show hotkeys. Where did there it goes. Where'd it go?
It shows you the line it's actually executing, not the line that it just executed.
Yeah. So here are the hotkeys that are in the script.
Mm-hmm. I love that you use this browser forward key. You like that one?
I do. I use it a lot. Yeah. And then the list lines are going to be the last. The last lines that were executed. Is that right?
Yeah. Right now I can't remember. I think it has the last 200 lines executed. And of course, if you have a loop going, that might not be very useful because 200 lines of the same loop will just repeat multiple times. So, but other times it can be quite useful to see where you are if you are not in debugging mode. If the script has just stopped somewhere, this can be an easy way of looking and seeing, hey, what's hanging? What is it still waiting for a window, or is it this loop just going indefinitely, or is it waiting for something?
Right.
Last lines can easily show you in a quick way.
Yeah, and then this was just showing you the last keystrokes, the key history. So here's notice the D. This is up down, right?
Yeah.
It was down. I don't think I can zoom in. Someone was asking about. I don't know if I don't think I can increase the font size on this.
No, most likely not. No.
Yeah, but notice it says TTEESSTT, and that's because it's the down and up for each of those. And then the other one, which I put in the deck here, which I guess it's on this slide, these are hooks that you can increase or decrease the amount of data points that it will hold for each of those things. By default, it doesn't actually keep a lot of the last keystrokes or mouse clicks, but you can play with that and change that if you want more.
Yeah, you can extend it.
Mm-hmm. All right, now let me and I'll zoom in here, but I can't. I don't think I can zoom in the other one. So I'm going to exit out of this script and close this, and I'm going to fire up Studio and switch over to using it because it has some really cool built-in stuff. Now, unfortunately, well, I don't know, however you say it, I like menu buttons to do things, right? So I made a button to launch Debugger. If you don't have that, you hit Alt-M, debug, and debug current script, right? So that puts you into debug mode, and I'm going to say view the variable browser. And now, as I step into it, I can either hit Alt-E or step into it, and this will start. It works in a lot of ways very similar to what I was showing you, but what I really like is like here, I can automatically show you what are in the objects without going through all those tedious things, right, that I did in Sight. And I can double click and update them and do whatever I want.
Yeah, I would say that I think that maybe, yeah, that's great. It's good, and the one that made it for SetA, he probably just had another mindset with kind of putting it in another place. But yeah, it's always been nice that these debuggers allows you to actually view what's in the objects, because more often than not, you will happen to have something in there that might be in the wrong place, or you have named it something differently, or you have more depth in your object than you actually thought you had, or something like that.
And Jackie, that's what I was going to say was, when I first saw this and how easy it was to see my object, how it's laid out, I'm like, you know what? Even if I'm not quote unquote debugging, just because I am not very familiar with objects, to be able to have a literal diagram of how the object is built is really helpful for me. And so I really liked that it was that easy to see it. The other one in Sight and Studio both do is after you've gone over one, you can mouse over and see how here, if I mouse over the variable dog, a tooltip comes up and shows me it's a global variable and that it has the content of Boxer. So that, I think that's pretty cool too. Of I can mouse over anywhere in the script, and it'll tell you if the variable has something, the contents of it at that point in time.
Yeah. So if var hadn't been filled with hellos yet, you wouldn't see that there.
Right. Yeah. And I think on I think there we go. Let's see. Hello. I'll say world 2, and now hopefully.
Yeah, it's dynamic. I would have thought so as well. So that's good.
Yeah, that's pretty powerful to see. So I'm looking at my notes of what I wanted to make sure that I covered.
But doesn't that actually work within it already, or how is that? No, that
it
couldn't
does.
actually.
Which part? The mouse over?
Yeah, I'm just thinking that can't really work without the debugging going, right?
Right. No, I don't think it does. Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, it has to have processed it, and yeah. The other one I just want to demonstrate, just in case you haven't done this, and it's not really in the debugger. Let me get rid of the debug mode. But let's say I wanted to know.
We have a question about explaining the differences between SetA and Studio. I don't know if you have any words on that, Joe.
In 1 second, let me finish up this, and then I'll do my best. So
Yeah.
this is how I typically use the isObject function, right? And here's my run button. Yeah, hopefully that'll work all right. Why didn't that launch?
Could not close the previous instance of the script. Something is
I
probably
guess
hanging.
because let me stop here, and I think I can hit this run button. There we go. So this one, this is saying if this was not an object, it would this message box would return to 0. And
Yeah,
so
it's
that,
returning true for it
right,
being an
yeah.
object. Yeah.
So that is one, man. If you're not used to using objects, that's my go-to. The first time, if I'm doing anything and I think it's an object, I just test that real quickly because it's one of those you'll kill yourself later if you realize like, oh, it just wasn't an object and that whole time you wasted.
Yeah.
So as for Site and Studio, so Jackie and I both, when we started talking years ago, we were both loved using Site. I use different. I've really customized mine, and Jackie doesn't. And I use Site a lot because I also use SQL and HTML and sometimes Python and other languages. Um, AutoHotkey Studio was built solely for AutoHotkey, and it's actually built in AutoHotkey. And so, Site, I have, I think, around 80 different IntelliSense programming, languages that can show the color coding and help with stuff. But AutoHotkey Studio is built by Maestriath is very robust, but it's built only for AutoHotkey. And I have like a 2-hour video, I think, where Maestriath walked me through. I kept throwing at him everything I really loved about Site, and virtually everything that I loved about it was in Studio. And we actually had a demo. If you see, what was that? I think our first webinar, Jackie, if I remember right.
Yeah, it might be. Yeah.
Was talking about Studio, so we have a good video on that.
Well, it's Maestriath himself who's actually
led it.
Yeah.
And he's also happy to, if you find something that you really like that isn't in there, he'll review it and possibly add it if it makes sense. But they're both great programs.
Yeah.
And they're both free. Yeah. And Notepad++ is another one. I didn't feature it here because I don't use it, but I know it has debug stuff built in, that you can use.
I'm pretty sure that Node++ is actually used by quite a few people.
Yeah.
I'm sure people use quite a lot of different editing tools, but I think SetA might be the one next after normal Notepad that is used by most.
That'd be my guess. Yeah. If you come to this link, which is from that webpage, I believe, here's a DBGP plugin for Notepad++ in using for troubleshooting, for debugging.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think everyone agrees that it's more of what you like. There's no like, holy cow, Studio has a lot of great stuff once you get used to it, of automatically, closing quotes for you and parentheses and wrapping, and but it takes some getting used to.
I'd say that had I started using Studio first, I would probably still be using Studio now. Yeah. But as I actually started using SetA first, that's just the one I go to. And the one when I install AutoHotkey on a new computer, I actually get SetA as well. And that's just force of habit, maybe. Mm-hmm. Because I'm using so little of the functionality in the actual editor. I'd say what I'm using most is the coloring of the code. And next after that, maybe a little insight to which parameters goes where when it's a command I don't use normally or something like that. But other than that, I don't really use any of the stuff that it actually provides.
Mm-hmm.
And that's just me, but that also means that I have no real reason to switch or to not switch.
Right.
But yeah, it's really up to.
I just remembered I wanted to demonstrate at least one of these functions. So this DMP, I think it's like dump. So if you have an object, actually, even if you have multiple objects, you can put them in like this, and when you run it, it will show you how this is actually like how they're accessed and their values. One caveat I got to note is I didn't realize it, but there's some sort of a string limit on this, and there was one time where I was beating my head against the wall of like what I was doing wrong, returning something, and it just had to do with the value that was in the stored in a variable was really long, and for whatever reason that this function was breaking on it. I don't know this next one. I think it works the same way in the sense of let me run it. Oh, that's right. I'm sorry. This one. Come on. There we go. So this one, it doesn't have a built-in display. So it will show you straight up what's in there. I don't think I can have multiple though. And I don't know if this one has that same hindrance with the length of the values. But I, not being a programmer and not using objects a lot, found it really helpful to have. I use this one a lot to just kind of peek inside. But now that I saw that in the debug, I can really easily see what's in the layout. I'm all about using that.
Yeah, absolutely. Again, it's nice to have it accessible through code, and that's also useful for different things. But for you as a debugging tool, the interface that's built over there might be just what you need, together with actually stepping through the code.
Yeah, and I think it gets back to when we talk about debugging. It is, there's one as we're showing you how to use a debugger with AutoHotkey, but that is when you're actually anyway. I guess where I'm trying to get to it is it's not just using that, right? It's your whole overall methodology and how you go about building your code and annotating and all the stuff. It's all related into spending less time trying to figure out what isn't working, and have better looking code, and then find ways to diagnose what's going on.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right, I'm gonna, unless anyone real quickly has questions, but I was gonna stop the recording, and then we'll start it back up again and unmute everybody, and then we'll see if anyone has. So